Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, the show dedicated to bring you the news from the oil patch deep in the heart of Texas, with your host, Ryan Ray and Josh Shelton.
We're back with the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. This is episode 142. I'm your host, Josh Shelton, my friend and co-host, Ryan Ray. Ryan, another week of the coronavirus and lots of news in the oil and gas market, man. So, ready to get into it today.
Yeah, good week. I was down at NAPE last week, so got to see a lot of good folks down there. People making fun of me that I'm still the co-host of this show, which is, it's insensitive people. Josh won't give me equal status. He's not, he doesn't work for the Center of Biological Diversity or whatever, so he's a Unitarian or whatever.
What are your pronouns, Ryan?
Yeah. Co-host, apparently. But it was good being down at NAPE. A lot of good stuff at NAPE. I read some mixed reports on what people experienced at NAPE, but for me, everyone I talked to was pretty upbeat, pretty excited. I know Ben and I will be doing a kind of NAPE recap here on our show this afternoon, but it didn't seem like it was the end of the world or anything like that. So thanks to the folks for having us down. And the coronavirus, the oil and gas markets, and we talked about the price turnover, Josh. We didn't know that the coronavirus was going to break out, but I did see a report, and I got to check it this morning, that the modeling, much we trust modeling on this show, but the modeling for the coronavirus was saying it's going to peak here pretty soon. So I'll be curious to see how much longer that's in the headlines, or if the model's, like every other model, completely wrong.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to keep an eye out. I've been looking at the coronavirus and seeing how it is affecting the oil and gas market. I think when this article came out, so February the 4th, oil and gas was at $49.61. So I think it went to a low. It's come back up a little bit since then, right? Yes. Yep, we're at Brent is at $53.95 today. WTI 50. So it actually dropped below 50 there for a little while.
Yeah, it was in the 49s last Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah, that ain't no good. Well, I saw some news. Elizabeth Warren months ago mentioned a ban on fracking. Bernie Sanders came out and said something similar about a fracking ban, and it looks like, my estimation, he's probably the front runner in the Democratic Party right now.
Did we know who won Iowa yet? Are they still debating that? I heard Pete won it, but I don't know. And I know Pete said he won it, and then they said he didn't win it. And I saw Bernie claim victory.
Okay. Pete has 13 delegates. Bernie has 12. So they're at 26.1 and 26.2%.
Wow.
So they're neck and neck.
And New Hampshire's tomorrow or tonight? Tomorrow, isn't it?
I am not.
Tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Tuesday, because they'll be listening to this tomorrow.
Caucus,
So, Tuesday. Yeah, wow. Okay.
And Biden was in actually fourth place. So I don't know what Pete whatever
Buttigieg.
I don't know what his stance on fracking is, but I know the second two, Bernie and Elizabeth, they're both for a ban on fracking. So something to keep an eye on. I think that's.
Yeah, I heard someone the other day saying that they didn't expect a lot of change in the markets, regardless of who the Democratic nominee were. And I found that interesting because if you have Sanders or Warren coming out, and they keep with the same rhetoric that they've had the primary season, it's hard to imagine that the markets wouldn't be concerned. At least the oil and gas markets wouldn't be concerned because if they get into a general primary with Trump and say those things, then I can't imagine how people wouldn't be concerned about the impact of that. And it would actually probably, if you think about it, it would actually help prices, maybe, because the fear of the shortage, because they'd ban it. So actually, hold on, let's work this through here. maybe we want to feel the burn in the primary season.
Yeah. It would be interesting.
Get the prices up.
It would be interesting to hear a debate between your market optimist and Speakner.
Speakner
on primaries.
Yeah, we got to do our Speakner. Oh gosh, we got to do our Speakner Prophet of Doom update. We didn't do that. We have to work on that as well. So, but yeah, so I guess that's the easiest thing to do it. If Bernie debated Trump in a general election debate and said he's going to ban fracking, and he was polling close to Trump, that would probably help prices because it'd be a fear of a shortage, right?
possible. Yeah.
Because the opposite would be true if he's like, yeah, we're gonna, if we're gonna socialize drilling and we're gonna pay for 1,000 rigs to come online, prices would probably be going down because people would be afraid of the glut. So, okay, so Burn, there we go.
There's your oil and gas pitch.
There's your oil and gas pitch, and for socialists like you and Nate, that's probably why y'all are going to vote for Bernie.
That's not fair. I'm a full-on communist.
He's the closest you got right now.
We have an article from Seeking Alpha. Chevron Corp Permian Basin is still growing. Fourth quarter revenues and other income were $36.35 billion, down 14.2% compared to same quarter a year ago. But they were looking at production and the amount of money being accumulated out there, and their numbers are showing that the Permian is actually still growing. So there was some articles that we saw. I think we mentioned one last week or the week before about peak oil in the Permian that is hit, and this article is indicating that we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, there was some kerfuffle, I believe is the word I'm looking for, about Exxon and Chevron, and and where they're going to do stuff. And one thing to consider with this coronavirus is, and I know I haven't read this morning what Russia said they're going to do, but if OPEC does pull some barrels off the market, at some point, I don't think this is going to be pandemic level where everyone's going to die and stuff like that. So if that happens, obviously prices will go way down because we won't need oil anymore. But since that's not going to happen, if OPEC does pull back some market and some of these softer prices, if they're prolonged for, let's say, March and April, you might see some companies that kind of get into some rough shape. Some more barrels come off the market here in the United States. It could be at a spot to where the second half of this year, the pendulum could swing a little bit more substantially than we would originally thought, because the first half deficits kind of are more severe, more impactful than what we thought. And so I'm curious to see how it's going to go. I know we've talked to some folks, Josh, and obviously this is a small sampling size, but there's also plenty of people who are like, yeah, we're going to be drilling and we're going to have a good year this year, and they're not really worried about the price, at least at this point.
Yeah, well, I want to stay optimistic. I think my hope is for the mid, second, third quarter to be fantastic this year. So, starting to kind of move my optimism down to the third quarter. So, we have another article, Ryan, before our guest comes on. Shale pioneer John Hess, that's from the New York Times. He says that U.S. fields are starting to plateau. So over the past decade, shale revolution turned the United States into the world's largest crude producer, and they're showing that the energy sector is only gaining 6% in a decade, far less than 180% return for the broader stock market. So he's showing the overall energy industry is starting to plateau here in the United States. So Pioneer, I mean, they've
it's a deal where, okay, well, depending on who you listen to, we're getting 10 to 20% of the oil out of the ground. So we talk about plateau. Obviously, that oil's going to be tough to get out, so that's consideration. But that's also, listen, 30 years ago they weren't getting this oil out of the ground. So 15, 20 years from now, will we be able to get the oil out, the remaining barrels out of the ground easier? I don't know. You would suspect we could at some point. Obviously, higher prices would incentivize that. Low prices don't incentivize that. And so when you get into these things, it's like, well, okay, if the prices stay between 45 and 55, then yeah, the Permian stuff will probably look a lot different. But if the prices go up, then okay, then maybe you look at that and go, it's 65. We can look at it and say, okay, well, it's 65. Maybe they're incentivized to try to get more barrels out for more effective ways. At 100, they're not really incentivized again. So the pricing has a lot to do with this. And we've heard this narrative before, though. It's kind of one of those things. It's like, when the Yankees, who I hate as a Red Sox fan, or Alabama's fine, top over Alabama. Yankees, Alabama, Duke basketball, Lakers. When all those teams are really good, or John Jones fought this weekend, I kind of get the mentality, until they lose, I just assume they're going to win, especially when it comes to big games. And that's kind of where I'm with Shale right now. Until obviously companies have lost money, but until we start to actually see some of these projections, okay, well, let's just kind of sit around and wait and go from there.
Today we have two guests joining us on the show. The first is Matthew Crawford, CEO at Dynamis Power. He's joining him is Travis Simmering, VP of Sales and Marketing. Guys, great to have you on the show today. Been looking forward to it.
Thanks, appreciate it. Really appreciate you inviting us on. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so real quick, give us the kind of 30-second high level of what you guys do, and that'll kind of lead us into why we wanted to have you on the show for today.
Sure, this is Matt. So when you and I first started talking about this, the reason I reached out to you guys, you were talking about on one of the earlier podcasts around some of the rolling brownouts that were happening in the West Texas area, specifically in the Midland Odessa area. And Dynamis Power Solutions, we use gas turbines to power all the electric fleets for Evolution Well Services, our sister company. And we're taking the Dynamis Power hypermobile solution into all different areas of the oil and gas industry, whether it be gas processing or midstream applications, operating a drill rig. So there's quite a few other applications within oil and gas that we're reaching out and branching into because of the success Evolution, our sister company, has had. So yeah, I just thought it made sense to reach out and to have an open dialogue around what we're trying to do to utilize all this additional gas we see in West Texas.
Yeah, so let's go back and let's talk about those brownouts, because we did cover that story. Let's kind of refresh everybody on what happened, and from your perspective, maybe some things the industry could have done to, I don't know if prevent's the right word, because sometimes these problems you don't realize, by the time you can realize you could prevent it, it's too late. But moving forward, some ways that we can look at from an industry help preventing some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that depends upon what report you read, there's about, 500 million SCUF a day being flared in West Texas in the Permian Basin currently. And, that's a significant amount of gas that could be used to power literally anything. The challenge we have is around the collection of the gas, being able to put it into a pipeline or something that's actually making it usable. But once we get into a collection point and able to run off of field gas, which 100% of our Evolution fleets are running off field gas today, so we're able to generate up to 35 megas of power with one single unit that can be rigged up pretty quickly. So, again, I think that's where we could probably do a little bit better job, a little bit better stewards of the hydrocarbons coming out of the ground to be able to basically generate almost free power when it comes to the fuel cost side.
Yeah, so one of the things, let's get into that. You said fuel costs. One of the things I've heard about this technology, some of the folks that are kind of against it said, well, when you look at using natural gas prices are cheap right now. Diesel prices, they're not high, but they're more expensive. But, if the natural gas prices, they go up marginally, the diesel price kind of stays where it is, you might get a spot to where you don't need the natural gas, or the natural gas is actually a deficit, and you've transitioned over to these e-frac type mentality, and it's not as cost effective in that market. What would you say to maybe someone who's concerned about that?
Yeah, so this is Travis. I mean, the difference between fueling off natural gas and diesel is, typical rule of thumb is about 10-to-1 cost differential. So we're talking about a pretty significant increase in the cost of natural gas that would kind of offset that thinking, right? So, I mean, we're at whatever you want to call it, depending on how your accounting principles have you assign a cost of gas, somewhere in the $2 range or less than $1 if you're looking at Waha. So even doubling or tripling that really doesn't offset the cost of diesel.
Okay, so you would say that the change would have to be so significant that in the current market, it's almost hard to even imagine us getting there. Because it's just the order of magnitude is just so large.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what I was getting at. So if you look at, long gas prices, it looks like we're going to be in this state for a while, right? And so I think that, imagining $10 gas is pretty kind of a stretch, right? So natural gas as a fuel source seems to be a pretty safe putt.
Yeah, and the reality is that if natural gas goes up that much, more than likely you're seeing a price increase in oil, which then thereby you see a price increase down the road with diesel. And one of the thought processes too. If you just think about even from putting cost aside for a second, obviously economics are always going to be the driving decision maker. But if you think about taking the oil out of the ground, trucking it to a refinery, turning it into some form of diesel, then trucking it back into the Permian, when all the while you could just be using the natural gas that's already there with mobile units. The overall carbon footprint of a diesel molecule is pretty high too. So in addition to the cost, you also have the environmental aspects of it, to saying, hey, listen, there's a simpler way to do this. Take some infrastructure investments in some cases to be able to get enough of the gas collected in one location. So I'm not denying that, but there's a better way to do it than just continuing to pull diesel back into the West Texas area.
When we talked offline back, I guess it was before the polar plunge. You talked about the trucking aspect, and that's one thing that kind of gets lost in this, and I wasn't even thinking about it in those terms. Josh and I have talked on the show multiple times about the impact that the roads are that the trucks are having on the roads out in West Texas or the Eagle Ford or wherever, and part of that is they're carrying around things like diesel fuel. Obviously, they're carrying around equipment and a lot of other things. And then we've also talked about the tragic deaths that are on the roads out there. And so, listen, we're not looking to get rid of people's jobs. That's not what we're not advocating for that, but we are free market guys, and if a free market solution is better, then we need to have that discussion. And part of what you guys are saying is you can eliminate some trucks, which A, will bring down the wrecks and fatalities, B, will lower insurance costs, C, will be good for the taxpayer because the roads will not be, the wear and tear on the roads is reduced. I don't know if y'all know how much it'd be reduced by, but it would be reduced. And those are things that when you it's not maybe the direct thing that everyone thinks about, but that actually impacts a lot of people and needs to be brought up when you talk about switching away from diesel to using the gas.
No, I think you're dead on there, because when we actually use evolution as a good test study, so when you think about the logistics of a frac pad, when you got the sand trucks coming in and out, you have the diesel fueling trucks that are coming in and out. It's like Grand Central Station with those trucks coming in and out of the roads constantly. Just by eliminating any of the diesel trucks that come in, just logistics-wise, the improvements that we've been able to see on the evolution side of the house with pressure pumping, I think it's a good test case to all of those trucks eliminated from that process. You take that to a grander scale and say, hey, we're going to significantly reduce the number of diesel trucks coming in and out of the West Texas Permian area. That's a huge improvement. I was with Baker Hughes prior to joining Dynamis, and we were very tough on folks when it came to driver safety. The stats that we had shared was that there's a death in the Permian area related to vehicular accidents every 27 hours. I don't know if that data is still accurate, but that was something that really drove home with us to try to eliminate the number of people that are on the roads, or at least bring it down to the point where you're increasing the safety factor by quite a bit.
Yeah, safety, insurance costs, and the insurance costs obviously for some companies is going to vary, but the fatality rate, not to make light of fatalities, but obviously the fatality rate for drivers for companies that have trucks, their insurance costs for fatalities. So not only do you save lives, you save monies, and then again back to the taxpayers with the roads who are they're paying their taxes to repair the roads every so often. These big trucks come out there. So there's a lot of impacts there that I think that need to be considered. And I'm not saying it's the case to switch or not to switch. I'm not really advocating either way. But when we talked, that was one of the things I really hadn't thought about. And I thought, that's something that needs to be brought up. Let's talk about, you said, okay, hey, you're going to save money. You're going to take some trucks off the road. You're going to reduce your carbon footprint, this, that, and the other. What about maintenance? One of the things that, if you're hearing this and you're going, okay, we kind of have our maintenance crews. We kind of know how maintenance works. We know what our parts are. We know all this stuff. Switching to this, how are we going to repair this stuff? Where are the parts coming from? For folks, how does that work? Because to me, I'm not a mechanical guy at all, but I can, once I kind of learn how to do something, I'd be kind of scared to switch just because if it breaks, how do I fix it?
Yeah. So this is Travis. I think the easiest way to handle that is typically when we explain to somebody switching to a gas turbine, it does feel a little uncomfortable. They're used to working on their diesel. And the best thing we can tell them is, look, just don't touch that gas turbine, right? So there are folks that are trained to work on the gas turbine. We have, 30 plus folks out in the field that work on our gas turbines as well as operator gas turbines. And the reality is the maintenance required for gas turbine is significantly in a diesel machine. So you just kind of get that in your mind. you don't have to do significant maintenance for about 3, sometimes 5 years. In the pressure pumping world, it's even further than that because it's based on the number of run hours. And so once folks get comfortable with that and they see that their gas turbine kind of just runs and doesn't have any issues, you see them getting a little more comfortable with the fact that, hey, that machine over there is operated by, professionals that know how to do that, right? And there's a lot of these companies out in the Permian now that are doing O&M on gas turbines because it's becoming, a lot more of a hot commodity, I guess.
Yeah, to give you guys an idea, this is Matt. When it comes to a gas turbine, minor and major overhauls is what we refer to them as. You don't have to do anything major with that gas turbine for the first 25,000 hours of runtime. To give you an idea, in the pressure pumping world, you're probably running at about 4,000 to 5,000 hours per year, ballpark. So you've got quite a few years before you've got to do any type of really major maintenance on that, which is much different to your point earlier. It's much different. People are used to working on diesels all the time because they require kind of routine, regular maintenance. And it's just a different technology requiring a different type of maintenance. And really, it's the intervals between the maintenance are quite a bit further out in comparison between the two technologies.
Yeah, and so on that, let's talk about I know what you're saying is, hey, we don't need to repair as often, but is there enough mechanics out there to repair the machines that will be in the field? So could you run to a spot where you've got a plethora of diesel mechanics per se, or folks who have been trained on working on these diesel machines, but is there enough to handle moving to gas turbines? Is there enough mechanics out there for those for that kind of a large scale transition?
No, definitely. It's a different level of skill set, and I would say currently we don't see that as a major bottleneck to be able to meet the needs of our fleets and all the units that we currently have that are out. So, no, I mean, it certainly is a different level of talent, a different skill set. However, the good thing is that power plants, I would say it's probably pulling from other industries, which is interesting to be in the midst of that right now. But at the end of the day, a gas turbine rotates, and it doesn't know if it's turning a generator that powers a frac fleet or a stream asset or a city generator. It just doesn't. It's the same.
Right, and so I would say to that is that A, it's a potential concern, but two, we talk about just 15 minutes ago we're saying, hey, if you made the switch, you would have truckers who would potentially be out of jobs. Obviously, there'd be impact, and so one of the things that we sometimes when you look at new technology, people are afraid of the jobs you might lose, but here would be something if you are a mechanic or you're mechanically inclined, you go, you know what, if I think that this is the way of the future, this would be a good time to now start getting your apprenticeship, going to school, whatever it is to get that, because if you guys are saying, hey, you know what, it's just kind of tight right now in this market, and the market does shift this way, now would be a good time to learn how to work on these machines.
No, I couldn't have said it better. I think this is a good time to start looking into that new technology as we're coming to that space. And I would say, certainly people could look at switching technology as a threat to jobs. I think there are bigger threats to jobs when you have major politicians out there saying they're going to do things like ban the things that are going. If we can show that, hey, we're being better stewards of the molecules that are coming out of the ground. To give you an idea, our larger units will consume about 6 million scuff per day at full load. So that's 6 million scuff per day that we could be putting into some type of electricity generating production for whatever application that would otherwise potentially be flared. So while I completely appreciate people wanting to make sure that, hey, we're not necessarily losing jobs, but we're also needing to ensure that we've kind of protected the industry, that we're being as efficient as possible with what we've been given.
Okay. Yep. Final thing. Give me you guys. We kind of talked about maybe some potential drawbacks, but you guys know. Obviously, we talked about some benefits, but what would be some other drawbacks that maybe for folks that are listening and like, okay, this sounds interesting. There's obviously some pros. You got cheaper cost, better maintenance schedule. You're lowering the trucking potential deaths, better insurance rates. Less wear and tear on the roads. Obviously, you might have a mechanic issue where you don't have enough. But what might be something else that we didn't cover that you go, you know what, this is something that this part of the industry, as we transition this way, needs to make sure that we adopt, that we get done, so that we can have a smoother transition if this is the wave of the future.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to the investment in the infrastructure somewhat, right? So if we're really going to make a big switch away from a liquid fuel base over to natural gas and use what's already there's a lot of it in the area. If we're gonna switch that, there needs to be investment in collection and in pipelines and some processing, right? Like I can't just take gas directly that would have been flared and run it through my unit. There needs to be some level of processing that goes on to make that fuel clean enough, takes the heavies out, gets to the right pressure. So there's some infrastructure requirements that need to be there, but I would argue that if we're going to put electricity into different places, that's all going to require infrastructure as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge. I think the number one challenge you've already hit on is making people comfortable with the technology. Although gas turbines have been around in other industries for a very long time, it's obviously very new to some of our oil and gas customers, so we need to make them comfortable with it. The maintenance side of it, like we talked about, especially too, and then the infrastructure. Once the infrastructure is there, it becomes much easier. That come free. That requires some investment dollars from E&P companies that are really behind it, which we're seeing at start, but it's a slow start.
Well, one thing Josh and I have talked about, I think on the show, but at least offline for sure, is that if you could have unlimited dollars, which I guess our federal government does because they just print it when they need it, but if you actually had unlimited dollars, you would, and you were going to build out our infrastructure grid today, you would do it fundamentally different than the way it was done back when it was built out. And so when you look at technology in the oil field, when we started drilling the Permian and that was booming, okay, we did it a certain way, and if this technology is the wave of the future, okay, then we need to make that switch, and those switches are hard, but we had to have those conversations. And so when you think about massive infrastructure, sometimes people are a little bit hesitant because it does change. It takes a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of effort, and there's a lot of fear and trepidation. But also, sometimes it does take those massive swings to actually get things to be more efficient, to work better. And so this will be something that Josh and I know will be following. It's been something that you guys have brought up and some other folks have brought up as well. So for the simpleton like myself, it was good to kind of get some of these questions answered and get a better understanding. And I'm sure we'll have some listeners who will have opinions on it one way or another. In the meantime, folks that are hearing this, they say, I want to hear more about this. I want to meet you guys maybe or whatever. Where can people connect with you? I know y'all weren't at NAPE last week. You're at another conference. So if you have another conference you're going to be at, where can they meet you at a conference, LinkedIn? Why don't you put folks to where they can connect with you offline?
Sure, yeah. So you can reach us at www.dynamisps.com, and then also our LinkedIn page is Dynamis Power Solutions. You can reach out to Matt or myself, Travis, directly. We're pretty easily accessible. What I did want to mention, though, when you say infrastructure, large infrastructure, what we think is a key in this power space is mobility, and so taking the power to where the fuel source is. And so folks that are afraid of it, that's why we want to educate them on how accessible the power can be versus these large infrastructure plays. But, we'd love to talk to folks further about, building out their power infrastructure and a larger power strategy.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm saying that, if you're going to buy a new truck, it's not like we're saying, hey, we're deciding between the Ram 2500 and the Ford F-250. When you start thinking these grandiose type big pieces of machinery, long-term maintenance cycles, you start going, oh, it's just kind of scary because you're like, okay, this is a 15-year deal. What if it didn't work out? How am I going to fit, and do I do one? Do I do four? Do I got to build a pipeline? You start thinking, and it can compound on you very quickly. And the only thing I'm trying to say is that, yes, that you guys are a little bit different, but also, part of the infrastructure problems that we see here in the United States as far as either roads or electricity or whatever is because we have a system that was built before we have the technology we do today. So as we move forward, we want to try to make sure that we are keeping up going, okay, hey, you know what? We did it this way. It worked really good, and that was great, but now we want to maybe transition to this, and this might be one of those technologies that is a good catalyst for that kind of movement.
Sure.
Okay, well, fellas, thank you so much for coming on. We will link to the website and all of that in the show notes, and it was good to have you on, and best of luck, and as things develop, I'll get you on again in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Matthew Crawford and Travis Simmering for coming on the show today to talk about natural gas turbines. Fascinating stuff. Been looking at it and thinking about it for a while, so great to have them on. With that, Ryan, we're going to hit the Texas Roundup and run through a few stories, or okay, we can we'll run through those real quick.
This will be a short episode for our friend. We won't say his name. He lives up in Dallas, but this one's for you, sir.
Yes, sir. I know you're talking about. So, first thing, oil and gas stock roundup, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shale report Q4 earnings. I'm going to link that in the show notes if you want to check it out. South Cross Energy exits bankruptcy, moving headquarters to Houston. Good friend Sergio wrote that article. And he also wrote, ConocoPhillips ready for a major round of drilling in Eagleford Shale. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Plains All-American oil pipeline volume gets boost from Cactus 2. That is a Hart Energy article. And Equinor, Shale buy out Schlumberger in Argentina's Vaca Muerta Shale.
You didn't get a single word right in that sentence. I can guarantee.
That's too many French words, man.
That's Spanish, actually.
That's Spanish.
Hey,
Vaca muerta means dead cow.
Vaca Muerta.
You didn't get a single one right. I hope you did at least. It didn't sound right, which I can't say English, much less Spanish. So,
well, they completed a $355 million joint acquisition.
A bunch of companies that I didn't pronounce right. Hope you go figure it out. They closed a big deal.
Yeah, big deal. Show notes.
Exciting times in Argentina.
Matador Resources Company announces date of fourth quarter and full year 2019 earnings release. Let's see. I looked it up. February 25th, 2020. That's going to be their fourth quarter release. So management will also have a live conference call on Wednesday, February 26th. And last but not least, nope, that is actually it. So the last one was just to mention the oil price, where it was at, just taking a look. We've already went over that. So with that, Ryan, I think that wraps us up.
We need some more Spanish stories.
We do.
All right, well, it's good to get back on the show. We'll keep it short today as promised. We'll be back next week. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time,